Well, good evening, NVUSD families. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we share a little bit about the progress we've made in redesigning our middle schools. Can we go to the next slide? Please, thank you. So tonight, you'll hear from me. I'm Pat Andrea Jennings. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Support Services. Also tonight on our panel is Dr. Rosanna Musetti, who's our superintendent. We also have Director Matt Manning and Director Monica Reddy, who are both Directors of Curriculum Instruction and English Learner Services, and Chris Gross, our Director of Enrollment and Accountability. You will hear specifically from some of our site leadership. So on our panel tonight, we have Brian Gardner, who is the principal of Sher, Frank Silva, who's the principal at Browns Valley, Alejandra Uribe, who is the current principal at Napa Valley Language Academy, but soon to be starting in, well, she's actually kind of jumped in and started the role at Omnidos Middle School, which will be our new dual language middle school that you'll hear about tonight. We have Carlisa Baltalier, who's from American Canyon Middle School. She's the principal there. Jen Cole from Silverado, and Marianne Christopherson, who's the principal at Silverado. So we have a full panel tonight here to share exciting news around our middle school programming. So can we go to the next slide, please? So the NVUSD School Board identified the redesign of our middle school programming as board priority number 1. So that is one of our tasks this year, is really to make sure that we are living up to our strategic plan goals of making sure students experience responsive and engaging pedagogy, and that the students are thriving socially, emotionally, and academically. So with these two goals and priorities in mind, we looked at redesigning our middle schools. Next slide, please. So why is that? Why was this the focus? And Director Reddy will talk a little bit about what came out of the middle school process last spring. But really our goal is to improve the middle school student and family experience. And so that's what we set out to do to better serve our students and families. And with that, I'm going to pass to Director Reddy, and she's going to share about the interest that came out of the process in the spring and how we're going to implement that in the 2022-2023 school year. So with that, Director Reddy, take it away.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings. Next slide, please, Mr. Michaels. So as mentioned in the spring during the redesign process, there were interests that were collected from that committee in our community around the middle schools. And so you see those highlighted here tonight. Each of these you'll hear in our presentation have been addressed as we've moved forward with our redesign process for our middle schools. So you should hear us speak to how our students will have time within the day to build connections, equity around programming, building small learning communities as we're growing some of our comprehensives, after school programming and transportation, the importance of social emotional learning, our transitional support for our staff, students, and families, as well as strengthening our K-12 dual language immersion pathway. Next slide, please. So NVUSD middle schools have options for you that we are excited about, and some amazing leaders that are in our Zoom room tonight. And you'll have the opportunity to meet possibly in person through school tours. We have 3 options: the comprehensive option at American Canyon Middle School, Redwood Middle School, and Silverado Middle School. The Language and Cultural Arts Integration Academy for students at Omnidos Middle School, which was recently named, and then a K-8 pathway at Browns Valley and Sher, one of which has already started to be implemented at Sher this year. Next slide, please. So tonight you'll have the opportunity to hear about each of those options for middle schools in Napa Valley Unified School District. And we'll start off with our comprehensive middle schools, and I'm proud to hand it over to our middle school principal team. And so the principal of American Canyon Middle School will kick us off.
And before we get started in discussing about the comprehensive middle school team, next slide, please. We're going to talk about the middle school design team, which consists of representatives of each of the current middle school communities. And the design team consists of students, parents, teachers, administrators, ensuring that we have voices of all stakeholders. The team first met in August before the school year started, And we worked in partnership with equity designers from the company called Design for Emergence. With their facilitation, we were able to co-design a cohesive vision for Napa Valley Unified School District middle schools. And from there, we developed a theory of action and design principles that led us to agreements that brought coherence and alignment. All team members worked through strategic design thinking processes, guiding us forward in developing our first draft of the district's middle school vision and design principles. These drafts were shared out to other focus groups in the comprehensive middle school communities, and those focus groups consisted of student groups, staff, leadership teams, and parent groups. The next step in this process, the middle school design team was reconvened on October 15th after the district leadership gathered their feedback. The feedback was shared with the middle school design team. During the design team's time together, we synthesized the feedback and revised the vision and design principles, clarifying what was most important for our middle schools. The goal in all the transition with the middle school redesign was to provide a safe, responsive, and supportive process for students, families, and staff. The process has been amazing with the involvement of students at the center, with their voices and the voices of the community, parents, teachers, staff, and administrators, working collaboratively, forming creative opportunities and experiences. We leave each meeting with words of hope, excitement, and inspiration. In summary, next slide, please. The vision has gone through many iterations to what it is today, which is the vision of Napa Valley Unified School District middle schools is to provide an inclusive, equitable, responsive, restorative, and rigorous education where students have a sense of belonging. Students are encouraged to discover who they are and learn to advocate and contribute within a high quality educational environment. And what that means in more detail will be shared by Principal Christofferson as she discusses the core elements of our comprehensive middle schools.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Carlisa. Part of the work that was generated during the middle school redesign process was to provide a consistent practice across NVUSD middle schools for next school year. We'd like to call them core tenets or elements. And the first core element that we'd like to present is that all students will have time built into their schedule for a period that is focused on building community, social emotional development, and connection to adults and peers. The second core tenet or element is that all students will have integrated and designated social emotional learning. The third core tenet is all students will have equitable access to programming such as music, art, and other electives that we already have offered at our middle schools. A fourth tenet is all sites will facilitate opportunities for small learning communities that provide a safe, inclusive, and responsive learning environment. And an example of that would be the academic teaming that we currently have at Redwood. And then the fifth core tenet is that all sites will benefit from professional learning around equitable and effective grading practices. And we're already beginning to do some of that work this year. So much more work to be done, but it's exciting work and it's invigorating, and it's been a pleasure being part of this process. So now I'm going to hand it off to Jen Cole, the principal at Silverado Middle School.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So what does the day look like for kids when they arrive on the campus? So at each and every middle school, we will have 6 periods. Those periods will consist of English language arts, math, social studies or social science, science, PE, and an elective. And we want to make sure that those electives are equitable across all of our schools. Those electives will include leadership opportunities, visual arts, and performing arts. They will also include AVID, advancement via individual determination, which is a K-12 program in NVUSD. And we will also build into our schedule flex time. That flex time will consist of social emotional learning as well as academic support for students. And so that's what the day in the life of a middle school student will look like in NVUSD. Thank you so much. I'm going to toss it back to Director Reddy, I believe.
Thank you. And now we'll hand it off so you can hear about the next option, and Principal Uribe will talk to you about Omnidos Middle School. Next slide, please.
Yes, good evening. So my name is Alejandro Uribe, and I'm currently the principal at NVLA, and we are working on building the program for Omnidos. And we're looking forward to its successful launch in August of 2021. Next slide, please. So the course offerings at Omnidos is slightly different than what was just shared. And so to give you a context of the uniqueness in terms of the offerings, I'm going to share with you the mission and vision for Omnidos. As you know, it's languages and cultural arts middle school. And you see that our mission and vision captures that. So the mission is to provide a global education that instills a love for learning and honors languages and cultures. And our vision is that all students are empowered to achieve academic excellence while growing bilingualism, biliteracy, and interpersonal connections in a community that is responsive to the well-being of all learners. Next slide, please. So we have three main elements, three core elements at Omnidos. As Principal Christopherson shared, we will also have middle school core elements. A lot of the core elements that you saw in the slide that Principal Christopherson shared, you will also see in Omnidos in my next slide. But then there will be some unique courses as we're looking at two different pathways that are both language-based. So the first pathway is our dual language immersion students who we are receiving from both NVLA and Pueblo Vista. They will continue on to their dual immersion pathway in the K-12 program that we offer here in the district. But then you'll also see some Spanish language art classes that we'll offer for students who are new to the language or have not had formal instruction in Spanish. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The third component to our program is that it will also be a cultural arts integration program, which means that we'll have content that is standards-based, right? And then we'll also integrate arts standards and create these beautiful units where students are learning about content, but then also gaining or having a greater understanding and appreciation for fine arts and performing arts. So next slide, please. So this is the day in the life of Omnidos Middle School. So again, you can see some similar components to our previous slide, but you can see that we have some differences with our classes here. So if you look at the first column with the light blue, that's our dual immersion student who will be taking English language arts. We'll have a math class. And our goal is to provide 3 Spanish classes for social studies, science, and then Spanish language arts and PE. The last 2 columns that are in the darker blue, we have separated those out because we have 2 different types of students learning Spanish, right? Students that are new to the language. So a new language learner would then take very similar classes as the core classes, but then as you can see towards the bottom, we would have a Spanish class, right? And the goal would be that for a student that lands or fits this category could potentially be on a track to earn their seal of biliteracy. And that's, work that we're gonna continue to do as we also provide this opportunity for this type of student. And then in the last column, our heritage speaker that is for a student, that track or that pathway would be for a student who, grew up speaking Spanish, but didn't have formal instruction in Spanish, can speak it well, but, the reading and writing is not a very strong, component of, their Spanish language. So for that particular student, they would take Spanish for Spanish speakers instead. So we also are going to offer early and late flight options as part of the program. But the exciting piece to this is that both of our tracks would be on pathway for earning the seal of biliteracy by the time they're in high school, either in 11th or 12th grade. And that's Omnidos. So I'm going to toss over to Monica.
Thank you, Principal Uribe. Next slide, please. So now it's time for Director Manning to talk about the K-8 schools.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here to introduce our potential K-8 options for next year, and those would be at Browns Valley and Sher schools. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to start out by sharing a little bit of background information about where this idea for the K-8 models emerged. So this came out of the middle school redesign and closure process last year. There was a strong interest presented on the part of a group of parents in developing a K-8 school, and district staff determined that 2 school sites actually would be a good candidate for the K-8 option, those being Sher and Browns Valley, both meeting a potential need for families in South Napa. So families were given the opportunity last year, 5th grade families at Sher and Browns Valley, to enroll their students into 6th grade for this current school year, the 2021-2022 school year. So with that option, Sher did have a sufficient number of students to launch a program this year. So they were able to launch with one 6th grade class this year that has 34 students. Browns Valley at the end of last year just didn't have enough interest at that time for parents to start out this year. But we are moving forward with the K-8 option potentially for next school year. So Sher is currently offering the 6th grade class in Browns Valley we're looking at for next year. Next slide, please. So I'd like to give you a little bit of information about what our K-8 program will look like next year. So 6th grade will be continue to be part of will look more similar to the elementary school option, similar to what students would experience in TK through 5th grade. So students will have English, math, social studies, science, or PE that would be taught by the same teacher, or there would be opportunities for team teaching. If we have 2 teachers at the 6th grade level, they could certainly engage in team teaching so that students would have a couple of different teachers. Those students will continue to have a music class, just as the students do in 4th and 5th grade, and as we currently do for our 6th grade students across the district in the elementary programs where we do have 6th grade. So that will be what 6th grade will look like. 7th and 8th grade will be more of the middle school years model. So students will core across 2 courses, and what that means is that they'll have English and language arts taught together by one teacher, with their social studies, English language arts and social studies taught together by one teacher, and then math and science will also be taught by another teacher. They'll have an elective wheel with up to 4 elective opportunities, depending on the number of students that we are able to enroll, and then they'll have a PE class. So our program design in the K-8 schools is very much contingent upon enrollment. So for next year, we will be enrolling for 6th and 7th grades, and we are able to enroll for up to 2 classes per grade level. So what the program will look like is very much dependent upon how many classes we have at each grade level, and we'll know that as open enrollment unfolds. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a little bit more information about what the elective wheel would look like. So students, again, will be able to explore up to 4 different options for their elective wheel, and we'll determine what those electives will be based on the skill level, the skill sets, and the talents of the teachers that are coming in to teach in 6th and 7th grade in these schools, and then where those interests overlap with what the interests of students and parents are. So we'll make those determinations when we know who is coming to teach with us. And then some possible options that we've brainstormed would be around leadership, community service, social justice, art, possible robotics, or a garden class. So these are some of the options that we've brainstormed and come up with. And then those topics, again, will be finalized when we determine who the teachers are that are teaching in our 7th and 8th grade programs, 7th grade for next year, and then potentially 8th grade for the following year. Next slide, please. So we also will be offering school tours for the K-8 programs, and you'll notice here that Browns Valley is indicated as a TK-8 school because Browns Valley will continue to offer TK in their program, whereas Sher will be a K-8 school. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Principal Frank Silva and Principal Brian Gardner to talk to you a little bit about their schools and the tours that they'll be offering. So we'll start with you, Mr. Silva.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to have a TK-8 at Browns Valley Elementary School. Our community is welcoming it, and we've wanted it for a while. So to hear more about our program, you can see that we have several options listed, and we hope to see you at our school at November 1st, 4th, or 17th, and there's multiple opportunities to visit our wonderful learning community. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We look forward to meeting anybody that's interested in coming to Browns Valley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silva. Mr. Gardner.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're super excited to have this opportunity to grow the wonderful community that we have at Sher. And so we do invite you to come and visit us. We have 2 scheduled tours on the 1st of November at 3 o'clock and Wednesday, November 3rd at 3 o'clock. Then also we'll be open if certain families want to come and just tour the school at a time that's more convenient for you. That would be great. But you'll be able to come and hear about all the wonderful programming that we have going on and the different support systems that we have at Sher. You'll hear a little bit from our Family Resource Center, our parent university, Cool School, and some other components of our school. So we hope to see you then.
Thank you very much to both of you. And I'm going to go ahead and pass back to Director Reddy.
Thank you, Director Manning. And now I'm going to hand it over to Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings.
Thank you, Director Reddy. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I know that we've presented quite a bit about programming, and so I know that there's some additional information that families need as they think about where they want to enroll their child. So we wanted to provide a little bit of information, what we know now. So I know it's not the full picture. We can't provide all the details because we're still working through some of the information. So currently around transportation, we are surveying students that live in the Harvest resident area. So those students who were impacted by school closure are the ones that we are surveying regarding transportation. After we have information around what the need is, then we'll be able to determine what the bus routes are, as well as we have committed to having an after-school activity bus to ensure that students who participate in after-school activities have a way to get back to their neighborhood, that students that were previously at Harvest. I will note that we did hear pretty clearly from families that this was a really big concern, and so we wanted to make sure that families know that we will have an after-school activity bus. Also regarding after-school programs, for the K-8s at Browns Valley, they currently have NVUSD childcare, and that would continue. And at Sher, they have Cool School available, and that would be offered as well for, I think, 6th grade, maybe not for 7th and 8th. At the middle school, at all our middle schools, we have an ACE program that's run by Napa County Office of Education. And we will be having NVUSD sponsored enrichment activities after school and our middle school as part of our middle school redesign. And those are things that will be determined and decided as we move through the design process. And each school will be able to offer some extra enrichment activities after school. Next slide, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Chris Gross, who's going to share about the enrollment process, because I know that this year in particular, it's more complicated than most years, just given the impact of school closures. And so she's going to walk you through sort of all the various scenarios and sort of what families need to do depending on where they are currently enrolled in and what their current resident area is. So with that, Dr. Gross, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. As we talk about the strategic plan, I do want to just pause here for a moment. And as we move to the logistics, just comment on reaching strategic plan goal number 4, which is centralized enrollment. And we just want to appreciate Rob Manguala's leadership in the business services to strengthen centralized enrollment, because now what we offer the community is the enrollment center. So many of these services that we can provide to families tonight, families can use the enrollment center now to assist them. So throughout my next few slides, I'll go quickly, but the community will hear about the enrollment center, and we are here to service and support the community through our email and our phone and in-person available in Central Napa, and we're also in-person available in American Canyon. So just making sure the community is serviced by NVUSD. So thinking about enrollment on many different levels this year, we know that we have students with different needs of enrollment. So quickly now, River, 6th and 7th grade currently attending students, as well as students in the dual language immersion, that would be Pueblo Vista, you can see there, NVLA, and of course our wonderful pocket of DLI children who are 7th grade Harvest. We are anticipating an automatic promotion to the next school at the middle school. No action is required. So if you're a family that you see there that you fit into that category, then there's no action required from you. If you request to attend your resident middle school in this group, then we would like you to contact the enrollment center, and that's the service that we will assist you with to be at your wonderful Silverado, Redwood, or American Canyon Middle. If you'd like to apply to a non-resident middle school, that's when we're going to ask the family to complete an open enrollment application. If you're one of the families in this category and you'd like to apply to Browns Valley or Sher, we'd like you to complete an open enrollment application. So again, a family can see this and think, well, this is my child, this is my family. And so those are some of the ways that the enrollment center can help get your family where you would like to be for next school year. Next slide, please. If you are a middle school student across the valley and you're interested in Omnidos Middle School and you're not at River and you're not in the DLI program, we encourage and we welcome families to apply, and you'll complete an open enrollment application. Again, the resident school can be found in the street table or on an interactive map. All Harvest families received a one-to-one support to understand your new resident middle school. So again, if you're a student and you'd like to attend the new middle school, you're welcome to do that. We encourage and welcome you. Next slide, please. Tonight, if you are a family with a child who is currently attending Browns Valley and Sher, we're going to send your family a survey. Your survey, you'll just select that you'd like to remain at Browns Valley for 6th grade, at Sher for 6th grade, and Sher for 7th grade. No further action would be required from you. But if you're a family that's sitting at Browns Valley and Sher and you would not like to automatically remain at that school, then you can see the second bullet. The enrollment center is here to support you. We'd like you to contact us. We'll help you maneuver to your resident middle school. And if you'd like to apply to a school that's not your resident middle school, there we go again. It's the open enrollment application. So families will need to see which kind of category they sit in and how the enrollment center will best be able to service your family. Next slide, please. And then we do have our Harvest resident middle school students. So if you're a family and you're a Harvest resident address, one-to-one notification of Redwood or Silverado, no action is required. Your child will wonderfully automatically enroll into either Silverado or Redwood, your new resident middle school. But again, you can see the pattern. If you'd like to attend another school other than your resident middle school, then you're welcome to open enroll. And we encourage families to open enroll. You can open enroll to the Omnidos Middle School by an open enrollment application. And of course, Browns Valley and Sher open enrollment available to both 6th and 7th grade at those K through 8 models. And you're welcome to do an open enrollment application. One more slide, please. There's frequently asked questions. They're located at nvusd.org enroll. And you'll find a large amount of frequently asked questions. You can peruse those, email the Enrollment Center, call the Enrollment Center, stop by the Enrollment Center at 2425 Jefferson Street. Some of these very frequently asked questions: do currently attending River students and Harvest students receive open enrollment priority? Yes, they do. When will families know if Browns Valley or Sher will have 6th and 7th grades? So we know open enrollment ends November 30th. We will pause, review capacities, and then we will reach out to families to verify, wonderful, that opportunity is for your family. Or we're going to allow your family to adjust your choices. And then we are going to do our open enrollment lottery together. So those families will have a moment. We'll have services for the families to help. So a question that we receive about the third one, you can read there for yourself, about the interested families for Browns Valley for 6th grade. And they may be interested for a 7th grade. And if yes, we have data, we have verification of those families, and we will work closely with families that they will receive the priority for Browns Valley 7th grade. And lastly, sibling priority is always available for all families. And so that is if the siblings are attending the school at the same time, and that's a sibling priority. So please, I'm encouraging the Enrollment Center teams, encouraging all families to access the site and to dig deep into the FAQs, call us, and we're here to service you. Thank you, Ms. Reddy. I think that's good.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. That concludes the sort of the formal part of our presentation. And we're going to open it up for questions. But before we do that, I wanted to invite to see if Dr. Massetti or any other speakers have any anything that they would like to add or clarify.
No, I want to thank our team for their comprehensive presentation and everyone's contributions to providing this information to the community this evening. And I'd rather reserve the time for maximizing the time for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Massetti. I do think the team did an exceptional job of presenting. So let's go ahead and we'll start with questions. And I see the first hand up is Alexis Munoz. If we can unmute her, and then Alexis, what question do you have and how can we help? You will need to unmute, Alexis. There you go.
I'm sorry, that was an accident.
No, no worries. Oh, the hand raise is an accident?
Yeah.
Oh, no worries. You have a good evening. Okay.
Thank you too.
You're welcome. Amanda Vance. How can we help you?
Just as a background, I have a 7th grader at Harvest. We live in the Harvest neighborhood. And my first question is regarding busing. I was told when I got the call about which school my child would be enrolled in, that the bus would be only from Harvest itself. That's where the bus stop would be. And I'm wondering, I'm hearing something different in this meeting. Is that the case? Is it still, because there's a bus that picks up in my neighborhood for snow. I don't get why my child would go walk a mile to Harvest to be bused over to Silverado when he could just walk to Silverado in that time. So I just wanted some clarification on that.
So I just want to clarify, you said you are currently in the Harvest resident area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Gross,
and next will be considered Silverado.
Your next school would be Silverado. Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Gross, I saw you raise your hand. Do you want to respond?
Just a quick comment. Thank you, Amanda. I'm glad you did receive your one-to-one support. At this time, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. At this time, we are reviewing the network of transportation. So I understand what you're saying, the buses that are around you that you see. At this time, we're exploring an option of running 3 bus routes out of a hub type from Harvest. And so that is correct. We're exploring running a bus from Harvest to Silverado and back to Harvest. Again, the late bus has been mentioned as well. And then of course, the bus hub from Harvest to Redwood, back to Harvest, and from Harvest over to Omnidos and back to Harvest. Those are just exploratory at this time, Amanda. We still have community outreach to do, but that is correct. That's what you've been told in your communication.
And just to add to that, Amanda, is that we are trying to determine what the need is, and based on that, determine like what we need to do in terms of hubs or bus routes. We need to kind of have to get a sense of how many families, where do they live, and what kind of transportation needs they have. That especially the ones that are
as far as a hub at Harvest, it works for those families that live over there, but for mine, it absolutely doesn't. The second question I have, and it's kind of a twofold question that can kind of be answered at once. As I mentioned, I have a 7th grader at Harvest Middle School. He is not in the dual immersion program. And my experience over this school year is I feel like he is being left behind, quite frankly. The teachers at Harvest, they're fantastic. They're hanging in there. They're doing the best they can. But for example, his art elective class, he didn't have a teacher for 6 weeks. So the question I have is, what is going to be done for the current 6th and 7th grade students at Harvest to help enhance what is their last year at their middle school? And what's going to be done to help their transition into their new school, because they're going to be the new guys. They're going to be targets for bullying. So I'm just curious what the district has planned for that.
Well, thank you for asking. And before I toss to Director Reddy, who can talk about sort of the transition plan in the spring for families and students that are going to be impacted by the school closure and consolidation. So we are working with Principal Franco at Harvest to make sure that the students for this last year at Harvest have a high quality program. And I do agree with you, the teachers are exceptional at Harvest. And so we will continue to work with her to develop a program that and make sure that the students don't feel left behind or getting less than they would if they were at another school. So we will continue to do that work. And then I'm going to pass to Director Reddy, who will share about the transition plan that we are going to be implementing in the spring to support that transition for students and families to their new schools.
Thank you. Yes, we are currently working with our design team collectively, but as we move towards knowing where our students are enrolling, you'll see a shift in January. And so our principals and our school sites will have the opportunity to work with our design partner, focus specifically on their school, how they prepare for 22-23, how we transition students, how we transition families, and how we provide that support. Because having been a former middle school principal, the transition in middle school is already quite the transition. And so we know that some additional support at the site level needs to occur with our design team. And so I hope in the second semester that you see some additional support provided as you make that transition into your next school, and that it starts earlier than it would typically.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Our next hand is Catherine Fleming.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for this info session. It's been really helpful. I just had a quick questions. One is hopefully really easy. My daughter will most likely be going to Omnidos, and with the tours being scheduled on days when there aren't the other schools there, one thing I wasn't clear on is, are the students expected to come to the school tours as well? Because I know she'd really like to see the campus.
That's an easy answer, and absolutely, students are expected to come and tour the school for any of our schools to be a part of that, because they're joining that community, whichever school they end up landing at. I don't know if there's any additional information any of the middle school principals wanted to add to that. Or Director Reddy.
I know that in particular with Omnidos, that it is a unique tour. And so Principal Uribe has reached out to students to help guide that and have the opportunity to see the campus and kind of visualize what that next step is important, as they've been on their home campus for typically K-5 to be able to see that next step, that next level. And so also additionally with some of our COVID guidelines, in order to provide some additional protections, all the school tours will be after hours. And so you'll be able to hear from the staff and some of the students, but won't necessarily be able to see classes in session during that time.
And I'd also just like to add that the school tours and sort of the formalized process of having school tours at all of our middle schools is part of the work in terms of that transitioning of students, so that they get an opportunity to see what the middle school campuses are like. We typically don't do that this early in the school year for students. So that is part of our effort to do that work. Does that answer your question, Catherine?
That's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Simone O'Neill. What question do you have, Simone?
Hi there, thank you.
Hello.
For those of us who, for example, may be at Browns Valley or at Shearer, as I understand it, you're looking to field a class of at least 34 and possibly 2 classes. What happens, for example, if there are not enough kids to field a 34-person class, or been a 68, 2-person class? What happens to those students? Would they then be forced into their resident school, or will they have an open enrollment period? How will that work?
Okay, thank you, Simone. I'm gonna let Dr. Gross answer that.
Thank you, Simone. That's correct. So thank you for that question. November 30th, the applications will close, and we've embedded this into our timeline. We'll pause, we will review capacity, and if we wonderfully have the 1 to 34 or 2 to 64, then that's great. If not, every family that has indicated on the survey or has done an open enrollment application to Browns Valley and Sher are going to get a phone call. You'll get the phone call at the beginning of December until we reach you. Your family will verify if you would like to do open enrollment or if you would like to take a seat at your resident middle school. Following that verification, we will then move forward with all the lotteries for open enrollment. So we've embedded a pause there if in fact we have the ability to move forward, or we are going to contact families to make a quick choice, and then we'll move forward together as a district.
Okay. Thank you, Simone. The next person is Claire McConnell.
Hi, thank you so much. We are on our way from dance class, so if I lose you, I apologize. So I have a few questions. I have a current 6th grader at River who is hoping to stay and be part of the new Omnidos school. And then I have one right underneath her who's in 5th at Northwood. And she very much wants to go to Redwood, although my preference is for her to also go to Omnidos. I noticed in one of the slides it said preference to siblings. So question if that's, what is the percentage of likelihood of her getting into Omnidos? And then secondly, my concern with sending her to Redwood is that if I've done the math correctly, each middle school, Silverado and Redwood, will increase by almost 460 students from losing kids at River, which from what we've guided from most of the class are leaving River for Redwood, that they're not staying as part of the Omnidos. So if those numbers are correct, and as Redwood and Silverado are already very large middle schools, how are you guys going to handle the increase with 460 more children per school? Is there more classrooms being built? Are there more teachers? How is that going to be handled?
Okay. Thank you, Claire. First of all, I understand the desire to have your students at the same school. As a parent, just transportation, all sorts of other things. So I'm going to let Dr. Gross answer the question regarding the sibling, and then we'll talk about the enrollment, like what the actual enrollments would look like at the middle schools after this coming school year. So Dr. Gross.
Yes, thank you. There is a sibling priority for all of our students in the Valley. And so if a student is currently attending, as you've expressed, and that child will be in the school during the same new enrollment sibling, then your child, your incoming sixth grader would receive a sibling preference. And as we talk about enrollment and capacity, we also understand that we can generate wait lists. So that's one thing that might occur for families. So I am encouraging families, if they would like to do open enrollment, to make 2 choices. You have up to 2 choices, but Claire, sibling priority will be given to your incoming child for 6th grade.
And just to clarify, your 6th grader who's currently at River would have an automatic seat at Omnidos. So just to clarify that. And then in terms of student enrollment, in terms of the projections that we've done, our schools were not going to be adding 400 more. One, the decline in enrollment, that's real. But also, as you think about the capacity of the current River campus as being 600 students, and Harvest is closing, and it currently has a little over somewhere between 400 and 500 students, that those students would be are the ones that would be dispersed to Redwood and Silverado, with a group going to River. So the capacity of the middle schools they're not going to be adding 400 students. The other thing that came out of the design process in the spring was that we currently have the capacity at our middle schools in terms of the buildings that are available for, I want to say that Redwood and Silverado are able to handle 1,200 students, and they will not be anywhere near that capacity. So in terms of enrollment, I don't know if there's anything anyone else wants to add.
Yeah, Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings, I'm actually going to pass to Principal Christopherson and Principal Cole to talk about, even amongst those numbers, how they create that smaller learning environment. They've been middle school principals for quite a while and have some expertise in this area.
Thank you.
So do you want me to go first, Jen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So thank you for the opportunity. So I have been at Redwood for a long time. I think this is my 15th year. When I first arrived, I was an assistant principal, and we were around 1,200 when I first arrived. And so the way that we handle that amount of students is to create academic teams. And that's where students share their 4 core teachers, and there's 168 students on a team. And that team will build community, connection, and trust with those sets of students. And they come up with common practices that they share throughout that team. And we are currently doing that now. And the exciting thing about getting bigger is that we will have adequate FTE. So we'll have more teachers to be able to really do that in the way that it should be done. So that's the way that we can provide a safer environment with that number of students. And we also will have two different lunch times and probably 2 different break times. So, we create that again, that smaller environment during the unstructured time. But we've done it before, and I have an excellent staff here, and I know Jen does too at her school. So I'm going to toss it to Jen, but it can be done. It will be done. And we're ready for the opportunity and the challenge.
Yeah, I would just echo everything that Principal Christopherson said. I've been at Silverado. This is my 7th year. And over the course of many years, we've been upwards of 900 and employed many of the same strategies as Redwood around core teaching in our 6th grade, teaming in our 7th and 8th grade, social emotional learning for kids across the board. but also creating community circles and doing a lot of team building within our classrooms. We have quite a large campus with many rooms that aren't utilized right now. And I heard, Marianne talk about her great teachers at Silverado, but also great teachers across the middle school system. And so as Harvest closes its doors, those teachers will come to us. They will still be great. They'll go to Redwood. They'll still be amazing. And so we are ready to receive and look forward to growing. When you grow, you increase your opportunities for elective options also. And so we look forward to expanding that program for students and offering more choices.
Carlisa, is there anything you want to add? I know American Canyon Middle School has been a larger community for a while. And is there anything additionally I want to make sure that our AC audience hears from you as well?
We do additionally the same things that Principal Christopherson and Principal Cole were mentioning. Our focus is on, we have the opportunities to provide a wealth of experiences for our students where they can try new things. And developmentally, middle school students like to try new things. And because we are a large comprehensive middle school, those experiences exist because of the opportunities and the electives. So those opportunities also provide that well-rounded approach, and students love it and they find their niche, and those communities that grow from that build those interests and also offers those new small communities, as well as we have advisories here at middle school, our small learning communities. And so that's how we build it here for our social emotional learning.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would just add one more comment, and it's super important for us to have really, really clear expectations for our students and ensuring that we really start off slow to move fast, and that they understand it. They have a firm understanding of what the expectation is for how we're going to function as a learning community. I think that is very, very key also. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Thank you, Principal Christopherson. I think the key words are there is learning and community. And that's what happens at middle school, is making sure that we have a very strong learning community. Thank you. Claire, I hope that answered all of your questions.
It did, yeah. Can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
That was super helpful. And then my only other, as I've connected with a number of parents that have or are hoping to break off, and I don't see it as any mention this evening, is there going to be any talk on the potential new Mayacamas charter middle?
No, Dr. Massetti, do you want to respond to that?
I'm happy to speak to that. So the Mayacamas charter is the concept of that school is, it's currently a charter petition that has been submitted to the district. If you want information on that, you can go to nvusd.org under charter schools. You'll see all the information. The petition has been submitted and is currently under review by the staff. And we are following the process that's laid out in the education code on review of charter petitions. So the first opportunity for the community to come out either in support or opposition for that charter petition will be at a public hearing on November the 4th. And then the staff will present their recommendation to the Board of Education on either approving or rejecting the charter petition. And that'll be at the December 9th board meeting. So staff will make their presentation there, and then the board will take action. So that's kind of the step that the school district does, and our decision or recommendation on whether it'll be approved or not will happen in December. Assuming it is approved, and if that's kind of how the scenario plays out, the district becomes the charter authorizer. And so the parents who enroll in that school would be disenrolling from NVUSD, and they would be attending that charter school. So that's how that works. But there's still quite a process that's in front of us in order to determine whether or not that would be an option for families. And again, that would be disenrolling from the district and attending the charter school.
Got it. Perfect. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next hand up is Faiza? I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yep, you did. Hi,
Okay.
my
Hi.
name is Faiza. I'm sorry if you've already answered this. I was just a few minutes late. The models that were presented today sound so intriguing and interesting. I was curious as to the K-8 model that was going to be considered for American Canyon.
Go ahead, Dr. Massetti. I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, no, I can answer that. I think the staff has done an incredible job of laying out sort of how we came to the options. Faiza, the K-8 option emerged when we were going through the difficult school closure process. And
Right.
I repeated this quite a bit then. And if you weren't part of that process, you probably didn't hear it, but I raised my hand so I can make the statement that I made during, again, the difficult school closure and consolidation processes. We were grateful to hear that this was an interest by the community. We made the decision to start the pilots at Sher and Browns Valley because they are on the south side of Napa. And we know that with the closure of Harvest, that area was being impacted. So we wanted to expand options on the south side of the city. And that's why Sher and Browns Valley were chosen, whereas the places in the schools where we are going to pilot this model. So we are going to be piloting. We are in a pilot mode around interest, assessing interest. We'll see what emerges again in the open enrollment process as was laid out by Dr. Gross. And then we are going to be piloting for, the near future, maybe 2 to 3 years to kind of see around sustainability to make sure that the interest sticks and people stick with the program before we would consider scaling it to any other region and or school in the district. So it's not currently going to be a model that we are piloting anywhere else. We don't want to scale it until we have the learning from the pilots. And we made that really clear when we were going through the closure consolidation process. And we're going to kind of stick to that for now. Lots of districts go on a widespread scaling of a model like K-8, and then they don't learn from it. They kind of go really fast. They go too wide, too fast, and don't really think about a solid program design and model. So we want to do our due diligence around the pilot first before we consider scaling it elsewhere.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Faiza. Eric Warden, how can we help you?
Hi, my question is about the pathway at Omnidos for new Spanish learners. I'm wondering if that pathway is considered a long-term feature of Omnidos, or is that more of a transitional piece as you move forward?
That's a really good question. Currently, it's the plan is to maintain that pathway as we. I think there will always be some space at Omnidos based on the numbers at the charter, the dual language feeders. So that will still be maintained as a pathway based on the dual language feeders that are going to be coming into the school, and it will take several years for us to get to the place of having to reevaluate that as a possible pathway. I don't know if Principal Uribe or Dr. Massetti wanted to add any additional information.
No, I'll be real candid. I think Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings alluded to it. Our goal is that facility has the capacity for approximately 600 students. We would like the facility to be fully enrolled. So our 2 elementary feeders immersion programs obviously get priority because the focus of the school is continuing the K-12 immersion pathway. But the likelihood that Puebla Vista and NVLA will be able to solely fill the schools is highly unlikely. And there will always be kind of that pathway for the remaining seats that don't get filled by the immersion feeder students. So that Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings named, we're building it with that as a core pathway, as was described by Principal Uribe, and the likelihood that will stick for a long time is very likely, and actually might just be in the fabric of the school permanently, because unless more immersions emerge in the district, which right now we don't have a plan to expand elementary immersion at the moment, it's likely to be at the, a pathway at the school. So we want to fill the school to maximum capacity at 600.
Great, thank you.
I think with that too, just programmatically, we're building the dual immersion program alongside a language program for new learners with the intention of having a robust program for both groups of students, such that, as Principal Uribe mentioned, that they have that opportunity to grow their language over those 7 years, 6 years, or 5 years, depending on when they enter, for some of our students who are already there. So that there is a strong language program for both groups of students on those pathways.
Yeah, and I've observed the work that this team has done, and any parents that are out there that are concerned around sort of the new language learners and them maybe not feeling part of the core in juxtaposition to our dual immersion students. I have observed, Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings, our Director Monica Reddy, and Principal Uribe in all of this design work. And there has been intense intentionality around making sure that this is, an inclusive environment. All students, whether they're proficient because they had the K-5 experience or they're an emerging Spanish learner, that there is a deep commitment for inclusion, and all of our students are going to have this benefit of acquiring a second language or deepening their second language. That's true for our Spanish proficient speakers who are deepening and getting more proficient in English in this environment as well. So they've had that as sort of a core guiding principle in their work. So I think it's an extraordinary opportunity for anyone who's interested in starting that language acquisition pathway. And we can guarantee that your students are going to feel that way, because I've seen them build that in to what they're doing. So it will be an extraordinary opportunity.
And it's reflected in the name, Unidos, like united. So the idea is to bring multiple groups together in the common cause or a common goal of growing language acquisition. So especially language acquisition in 2 languages. So thank you for your question. Wendy, can you, how can we help you? You'll have to unmute your mic, Wendy. We still can't hear you, so there you go.
Okay.
How can we help you?
Hi. So we have a 5th grader at Napa Valley Language Academy. We wanted to just clarify. So the River, the new school by Salvador, that one is the Unidos program.
Yes, that will be the Unidos. Starting in the 2022 school year, it will be Unidos Middle School, a dual language, cultural arts integration middle school.
Okay. And then for that one, do you guys not have any of like the buses, the transportation available for them?
So for students who were impacted by the school closures, that live in the Harvest, a former Harvest attendance area, those are the students that we are surveying now to determine what transportation needs to be provided.
Okay. So we do live by Harvest, so we were supposed to enroll for Harvest, so that would apply for us, correct?
Yeah. Yes, and I'm going to ask Dr. Gross if you wanted to. I believe families at current NVLA are also being surveyed regarding transportation, correct, Dr. Gross?
At this time, we know that Napa Valley Unified School District has had open enrollment for over 10 years, and the district has not provided transportation to open enrollment schools. And so we just anticipate that at this time, we are looking at a bus hub that would run from Harvest to Unidos and back to Harvest. And if any of the families that are living around NVUSD or Pueblo Vista, and it's more convenient for those DLI families to get onto the bus and run on that bus hub, then they're invited to do so. But again, we are reviewing the capacity. We will know more as the survey results come in. But thank you, Wendy, for that question. We know that that's an important thought for your family.
So Wendy, it's likely that you're going to qualify, it sounds like, right? So again, we're assessing and you're going to get individual phone calls around this, but it sounds like if you've been impacted by school closure, you live in the harvest attendance area, you will be provided the opportunity to take a bus from the hub. And when we say hub, that means we're not going to everybody's individual, bus stops and locations in their neighborhood, but you can go to Harvest and pick and get on a bus that will take you up to Omnidos. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. That was it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I know we're a little over time, but I want to make sure that we answer some of the remaining questions. So Joy, your hand is up next. Hi, Joy.
Hi. You talked a little bit in your presentation about safety. My daughter will be going to the American Canyon Middle School, and there has been an increase in violence. I've also heard about bathrooms being closed or only having one bathroom available for all the students. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the health and safety measures that you're taking for our middle school students. And then also, I just wanted to get an update on the new building. It looks wonderful. So just excited to see when that's going to be done.
Okay, thank you so much for your questions. So unfortunately, at the beginning of this school year, there was quite a bit of vandalism in bathrooms based on TikTok challenges. And so in response to that, schools have had to limit sort of the number of bathrooms that are open based on this, what supervision was available to ensure that we limited the amount of damage to our facilities. And so as that challenge, hopefully the interest in that has dissipated, more and more restrooms are being opened as we are able to communicate, as Principal Christopherson shared, clear expectations around student behavior and how we're going to be in a learning community. So I believe that that is one of the things that has been addressed as students have become more accustomed to being back in school and sort of the expectations of that. In terms of the increased violence, I know, or fights or aggression, we do know that our students were impacted during hybrid learning in terms of not necessarily being around a lot of other people, and that we were prepared as they came back to make sure that we spent a lot of time on social emotional learning, welcoming students back, doing community circles. But there has been, in some instances, some students that are still working through issues and conflicts in ways that we don't want them to. And so that's just, we're educators, we educate, we teach, and that's what we've been doing, is educating and teaching students as these issues come up and helping them to, hopefully make better choices. And I don't know, we have just this amazing, wonderful team of middle school administrators. I don't know if anyone wants to add to what other health and safety measures we've had in place or will continue to put in place as we work to improve what we do for our students. Principal Christopherson, did you want to
I can speak to that. I think we all, high visibility and a lot of adults out on campus during unstructured time. That is pivotal to keep a campus safe. And we're all working really hard and making sure that we have a lot of adults. So there are students see an adult, they can go to an adult if there is an issue that arises on campus, but we are very, very visible out on campus. Super important that kids see us so they know that there's an adult nearby.
Thank you, Principal Christopherson. And I do know that our middle schools have been working really, middle schools and high schools, well, all of our schools, on building positive school culture and sort of reestablishing that. Because many of the students in middle school in particular, 2/3 of the students have not been on a campus or had not been on a campus and hadn't been part of middle school culture and sort of expectations. And so I think we're finding our groove, and we'll continue to do that. And I'm going to open it back up. I don't know if Dr. Batalha, if you wanted to respond about ACMS.
I do, and I do know that if you were to walk on campus this week, last week, over the last few weeks, it's a positive vibe on campus. All the bathrooms have been open. Students' expectation, they do know the expectation, and we reiterate it, and they are very clear and consistent. We not only have supervision during unstructured time, but we also have constant supervision out during when classroom time. So there's adults out throughout the day. So students are aware that if they need anybody at any point in time, that they have somebody to talk to. So we're constantly rotating with administrators, campus supervisors, and counselors throughout the day so that we are available for our students to help them through the process, because the transition has been tough for adults, for students, for everyone. It's been just what we've gone through. Who would have known? So we're all working through it together, and we're making ourselves available. Students are being wonderful, and they're growing through the process with us. So we're growing and learning, and we're building this community together, and the vibe on campus is wonderful. And we're looking forward to more activities as they learn what the expectations are. So, and our hope is, every time I look over at the construction, 2022 August, we're hoping, because every day more pieces come in place. So the structure is growing.
And for those of you who have not been to ACMS, they are rebuilding their commons building, which had originally been designed for a school that was much smaller than what they have. So they are growing their commons building. Will be a multi-use space, and it'll be pretty remarkable in that. I look forward to the ribbon cutting for that. Thank you, Joy. Did you?
Thank you. Appreciate your leadership.
You're welcome. Myra Martinez. Hi, Myra.
Buenas tardes. Mi pregunta, bueno, en realidad es una preocupación. Los estudiantes de Sher y de Browns Valley, ¿estarían teniendo las mismas clases, mismos programas, el mismo apoyo que estuvieran teniendo los estudiantes de las escuelas intermedias?
So the question is,
gracias, Myra. So the question was around if students at Browns Valley or Sher will have the same level or same kind of activities and classes that the students at the other middle schools were. I don't know if Director Manning or one of the principals wants to respond to that.
Sure, I can respond to that question. So the answer is no, they won't have the same programs necessarily as they would have at the comprehensive middle schools. So much of that is dependent upon enrollment. So if we're fully enrolled with 2 classes of 32 to 34 students at each grade level, then we'll be able to offer additional programming for students around mental health supports, and additional with the electives, we'll have those opportunities as well. But it really is contingent upon enrollment. So it will look different. Students will have the same core academic, access to the same core academic instruction. They'll have a great learning experience, but it will not be the same as what they would be, what they would have at a comprehensive middle school.
Thank you. Myra, does that answer your question?
Un poco, porque la verdad me preocupa que estos estudiantes al llegar, por ejemplo, si hacen esa escuela hasta el grado 8, al llegar a la middle school vayan pues más bajos, o no sé cómo decirlo, un poco más retrasados que los niños que van de una escuela intermedia regular.
Señora Martinez.
So yes, and sort of that, what happens in terms of the transition from when they go through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at a kindergarten through 8th grade school. We know that we're going to need to do some transition planning for students who are going from a K-8, a school that they've been at for 8 or 9 years, and then as they transition to high school. But that typically is the model that you've seen for some of the private schools where they have a K-8, and then those students enter into high school And they're no further behind than they would have if they had gone to a middle school. So it is an option. It's not the option for every family because they're not going to have everything that a comprehensive middle school is offering, but it does provide a small learning community for students.
And I would just add that there's been, oh, sorry, Dr. Masseri, go ahead.
No, and I was going to say it in Spanish. So, señora Martínez, le quería decir que el currículo que están utilizando para los cursos principales como el estudio de lenguaje, matemáticas, ciencias, estudios sociales, es el mismo currículo, aunque están en un ambiente diferente porque están en la escuela primaria como ambiente escolar, el currículo va a ser igual. Entonces, no van a tener todas las mismas clases con arte, música, no va a ser igual. Pero los cursos principales, los cursos académicos principales van a utilizar el mismo currículo que están utilizando en las escuelas comprensivas.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add that in our design process, we've been looking at studying successful K-8 models in the Bay Area. So there are strong examples of K-8 schools that we're looking to ensure that we're building a strong program that sets our students up for success in high school. And we'll continue that design process once we have our students, once we have students enrolled and we begin to bring those families and students together to further that design work.
And I don't know if Principal Gardner or Principal Silva, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. You know, every one of these middle schools is unique and wonderful. They all offer wonderful opportunities for all the kids to learn. And the K-8 program, when I was a Bennett High assistant principal, I went to the private schools and I enrolled these students and they made smooth transitions. So what I've seen as an administrator at the high school for 3 years, when back in the day when my hair wasn't white, they did great transitions. So kids will transition and they'll have, and again, these students will have a great, unique, wonderful experience at any one of these schools.
Thank you, Principal Silva. Okay, thank you, Myra. The next hand is Lorena or Lorena.
Okay. Yes, I do have a question. So for the staff or the teachers that are gonna be, let's say, hired for the new middle school, since it's gonna be a dual immersion, are they gonna hire teachers from Harvest or they're gonna hire completely new teachers?
So teachers that are currently employed by our system who are working for us, whether they're at Harvest or Silverado, Redwood, or River, would be placed where there are vacancies or openings. So no teacher would lose a job during this process. They would be able to, transfer to Omnidos or transfer to they will follow the students. The teachers will follow where the students are. That said, Omnidos is offering will be offering some very unique courses that require special credentials. And in those circumstances, we would be recruiting teachers who either currently have those credentials or have the ability to earn it based on their current skills. So that's what would happen for those positions that are more unique at Omnidos.
Oh, okay. Right. And my other question is, it might not be that related to the new school, but I just would like to see in the next meeting when the Mayakamas school, the petition, when they're going to present it to the board, I would love to see if they can do like a chart so we can see how that is going to affect the enrollment at the middle school level on the district. Since 2 schools got closed this year, I would just love to see how that will affect. Since we're having like 2 schools already going to 7th and 8th grade added to the, or 6th grade added to the, like, I think it was Sher school, I think is going to have more grades added to it. I know it's a pilot thing, but I would just love to see how is that going to affect, because if the whole thing about closing 2 schools was that the enrollment was really low, I think it's going to be worse. And I appreciate you guys having the new middle school open, but I just would love to see how that is going to affect.
Okay, thank you.
So Ms. Munoz, I just want to understand your question so we can follow up. Your question is in a subsequent meeting, in a future meeting, to highlight the impact if the charter school were to open, what impact that would have on enrollment, right? So right now, yeah, okay. So I just want to make sure I understand. So right now the charter petition is projecting and anticipating 180 students. If their charter were to be approved, and they were able to get that enrollment, it would be a further decline of 180 students in the Napa Valley Unified School District. Because as I mentioned, students would be disenrolling from Napa Valley Unified, and they would be enrolling in the charter school. So that would contribute further to the district's decline of enrollment. So I think what I'm hearing you say is you're wondering what would be the impact of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all that will be surfaced and discussed in the December 9th board meeting when the staff presents its evaluation of the charter. So if you'd like to tune in for that, that's where I encourage you to go for that information.
Oh, okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We're going to take just a few more questions and try to end around 7:30. So Elizabeth Healy, you're next. How can we help you?
Hi, thank you. So we're very interested in the Unidos option. And I was just wondering, do we have a commitment to that school staying open for a few years, or is this going to be, we go for a year and it closes in a year? That was one of my questions. The other one is, has there been any consideration to adding an international baccalaureate component to Unidos to sort of extend that experience for the kids coming from formerly Mount George and Bel Air?
I'll speak to the first question and the instructional team can speak to the second question. So Ms. Healy, you have our commitment that, we went through this assessment around which schools to close at the middle school level. And, we know what decisions emerged. There was the Harvest closure and then the reprogramming of the campus on Salvador, which is currently River, which will be Omnidos next year. We have kind of dealt with our middle school enrollment issue, and that is a brand new facility. Lots of taxpayer money was invested into that facility, and that is not a facility that the district would consider closing, given the amount of taxpayer money that was invested in the renovation of that facility. So the district does not have an interest in closing that school.
Thank you, Dr. Massetti. And I think your second question was around, would we consider adding the International Baccalaureate program to Unidos? And that's not something that we have explored at this time around adding that as a way of sort of continuing that pathway. Because currently there's an International Baccalaureate program at Bel Air. That's not something we've considered. Anything that we do look at or want to explore, we would always consider the sustainability of that and the cost and the fiscal cost as well. So that's just not something we've considered at this time.
Thank you.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I do. I'm so excited about illuminating the great work that the principals and the design team have done. I think it's Ms. Healy, to your question around adding another program layer. I think right now, as you saw, as they laid out, there's the three pathways. There's the heritage speakers, there's the new language, the emerging Spanish, those that are going to pick up Spanish starting in 6th grade, and then the more proficient DLI students who've been learning language since kindergarten. It got glossed over, but to just kind of illuminate, because it's so exciting, is the cultural arts integration. That's going to be a great kind of unifying theme across those three pathways of where the students are in their language learning. And it's also a great scaffold for students as they acquire language and they're acquiring the Spanish language. That's why you see cultural arts, because that will be an opportunity for students to have a window into not only the language, but the culture, which contextualizes the language learning, no matter where the kids are in that language pathway. So right now, the focus is going to be that cultural arts integration along with the language learning. Adding a third component of programming, it just becomes too complex and unmanageable.
Makes sense. I'm excited about the new program. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, so we want to do things well as opposed to spreading ourselves too thin. So,
thank you, Dr. Massetti, for adding some
yeah,
clarification.
sorry, I just get so excited talking about it.
I know, and I think the cultural arts component is going to be amazing. And so, Richard. Hi,
hello.
Richard. Good evening.
Good evening. I just had one real quick question, just for process. If I want my kid to ultimately end up at my Camus, if that's what comes to fruition, do we still enroll in the junior high here? And then how does that impact if all of a sudden you have numbers pull out of 180 kids or whatever at the end of the after the November 30th enrollment?
So yes, you would be disenrolling from the Napa Valley Unified School District. So to your first question, yes, you will be leaving the school district and going to a charter school. That's the first question. What was your second question? How does that impact?
Sure. No, I guess my process first question is, we have to enroll by November 30th, right? So we don't know whether or not the charter school even exists before November 30th, because we won't have a meeting till then. So the process is that I still have to enroll in one of the middle school options,
yes.
Correct?
If you would, that would be what you would do, right? I would advise that that's what you do, because if the charter is not approved, then
okay.
Then you don't have a spot somewhere. So I would advise families to stay enrolled.
And then the budgeting question is more, if that actually comes to fruition, and now I've enrolled in one school and your budgets are based on that, and then we pull a bunch of kids out, how do we adapt to that as a district?
Yeah, that'll be a dilemma and a challenge to be solved for sure. So the loss of, and Maya Camus does not anticipate 180 in the first year. That's not their initial. That's when they become fully enrolled and whatnot. Yeah, that'll be an issue that we have to work with. Just like we work with losing. We've lost 250 kids on average for the last several years. Due to COVID, that's been accelerated, and we've managed responding to losing 450 students in a year. So if that becomes a variable, then the district has to respond in its decision-making to that loss in enrollment.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we'll take one last question. Colleen Gentry.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I was curious, what's going to happen with are there separate bathrooms for the older kids and the younger kids?
Oh, you're referencing at the K-8 schools?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. And I'm gonna see if one of the
I can respond to that
okay,
question. So we have conducted thorough walkthroughs of each of the facilities, Browns Valley and Sher, and determined locations for upper grade bathrooms and for lower grade bathrooms. So yes, there will be separation of bathrooms for students at those two school sites, and that can be illuminated more clearly if on school tours. If you're interested in those school tours and information sessions, you can see where those locations would be on each school site.
Okay, and then I had one more question. I've heard of a new sex ed program that's going to roll out for nationally, and I don't know if our district is implementing that.
Mrs. Gentry, I can follow up with you that because this is really around middle school, our redesign, and the sort of the program options for families. So okay. I would be more than happy to talk with you later, or have Director Reddy talk with you about what we do for sex education for middle school.
Okay.
Okay. So
because
I'm not aware of a nationally rolled out program that we have adopted, because anything we would do would be board approved. So
yeah. Okay. Just checking.
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Well, I just want to thank all of our participants tonight and also thank all of our panelists. You guys have done a phenomenal job. Lots of really good questions. It always gives us something to think about in terms of how we need to continue to clarify what information goes out and what people are wondering about and questioning. So thank you so much for your questions and for hanging in with us tonight. And I do want to thank the lovely panelists and our team for putting together this presentation. So with that, we're going to wrap. Everyone have a fabulous, fabulous evening, and we will see you in the coming weeks.